went to Mexico, I just decided to sell all my stuff and not have any plan for coming back. And I actually had a larger plan that I didn't fulfill. Like I was going to go to Mexico and then try to get to the coast, get on a boat and cross the ocean and keep going around the world.
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. It's Josh, your fearless leader. Actually, I'm full of fear, but I don't let that get in the way. And it didn't get in the way of my guest, Jacob Vaughan. He's a writer and director, and once upon a time, he sold everything, put on a backpack, and headed to Mexico where he found his inner compass.
I was in my early 20s and I'm half Mexican, but I don't look Mexican. I look white. I'm basically, my Caucasian father gave me most of his, genetics. And, I really love my, Mexican heritage. And, I'm second generation American. And I think from a very early age, I didn't like who I was and I wanted to be different. So identifying with my Mexican heritage was a way to sort of pretend to be different. I grew up in a very solid upper middle class suburban upbringing in Northwest Houston. So my life was incredibly boring, I thought. Now that I have kids, I know that this is a great place to grow up, but I was really bored and I wanted to, I'd been to college and I'd finished college and I just wanted to have an other type experience. I was living in Austin at the time, and a friend of mine named Alan Watts, who is not the philosopher Alan Watts, but he told me about this. He went down for 2 weeks down to Chiapas, which is a southern state in Mexico. All I knew about Chiapas at that time was that there was a lot of fighting going on. There were rebels, they were fighting the government, and it was I was like, whoa, you went to Chiapas? And he's like, yeah. I said, how did you get there? Oh, I took a bus. Wait, how did you know where to go? And he was just like, oh, there's buses to everywhere. And it's super cheap, insanely. American dollars go very far in Mexico. Here we are, me and Alan, two upper middle class, white, privileged people talking about, spending money in Mexico and how easy it is. It's like we're so privileged and it's sort of disgusting, but it's also when I was in my mid-20s, I was like, wow, I couldn't believe he did that. And I don't know about you, but growing up, I always thought Mexico was synonymous with dangerous, right? Mexico is not the place where you go. You go backpacking in Europe. So I took notes, I basically said, what did you do? Where did you go? And so I took 2 weeks and went over Christmas. I went 2 weeks to Chiapas and I went exactly where he went. I just wanted to do something that I knew someone else had done. And I could understand how it worked and whatever. So I went down there and immediately what happened was I took a bus all the way down there. It was amazing. And I found the place where he stayed at. I bought a hammock. I slept in a palapa, which is it's 4 poles with thatched roof. And I slept at that place and I went and I looked at the ruins. What I found out is that you instantly hook up with other travelers, connect. You meet people and you're asking the same questions. Where are you from? How long have you been here? What's your plan? Where are you going next? It's the same 5 questions you ask every other fellow traveler. And so you hook up with these people and I had a glimpse of this amazing freedom of being able to go anywhere and do anything in Mexico. And 2 weeks wasn't enough. By the time I came back, my mind was blown. And, Mexico was my new favorite place on the planet. And I wanted to go back. So at that point, I decided to try to work towards paying off all my debt because I had, some credit card debt. And then I wanted to get rid of my apartment. I wanted to get rid of all my stuff. I didn't want to have anything weighing me down. And I wanted to go back to Mexico with no return trip planned, like just go there for however long I wanted. And this was in 1999 when I was prepping to go, right? And it just so happened that I was lining up my trip to be in Mexico during Y2K. Remember Y2K? Everybody thought it was going to be a disaster and that civilization was going to shut down and the computers were going to get, break and everything. And so I thought this is perfect because I'm going to go to a place that does not rely on computers for, the infrastructure to run. And so if anything does happen, I'm going to be fine. I mean, there's going to be no difference. I'm going to be on a beach in Tulum. So this was all my whole plan. And I, got out of my lease and I gave away all my stuff. I had a party and I was like, here, take the bed, here, take my pots and pans. There were a couple of friends who were nervous about me. They were like, this is what people do before they, commit suicide or like they have a plan. I was like, no, I'm fine. And I told people my plan and they were like, okay, are you sure? So that's what I did. I got my backpack, I loaded it up. That was all I owned. And I left and got on a bus and crossed the border. I was traveling with this guy named Abe, and Abe was an avid traveler, and he told me he hitchhiked all the time in Canada. And I was like, how do you do that? Isn't that dangerous? And he said, oh, no, here's the way you do it. Put out your thumb, car pulls over. The first thing you do is you ask them the question, where are you headed? In the time interval that it takes for them to answer you, you get a read on them. You get a vibe. You look at the situation inside their car, you look at them, you just get the energy. And then they tell you where they're going. And if you get a good vibe and they're headed to the same place, you say, oh, that's where I'm going. Can I get a ride? But if they say where they're going and it happens to be the same place you're going and you don't get a good vibe, you can pass. It's a very easy way of doing it. And then, of course, if they're not going the same direction, you just let it go. I wanted to hitchhike in Mexico, of all places, which is really dumb. I mean, I was 22, 23. This was dumb. So I did it. I took my backpack and I was at the edge of town, a big city, 6 million people, called Culiacan. And it was like I was on a highway. It was ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking, but I went out there and I stood out there with my thumb out. And this guy in a truck pulled over, and it was a small truck, one of those little like Subaru trucks. And it had a business placard on the side, like it was a business car, and it had some furniture in the back. And I went up to the window and I said, ¿Dónde vas? He said, Uruapan, Michoacan, which is where I wanted to go. In that interval of time, it seemed to me like he was a good guy. It was a business car, so he was doing something official, for his company. And then B, he had all this stuff in the back. I mean, I just got good feeling from him. And so I said, okay. And so he got my backpack, we put it in the back, which I thought, man, that was a mistake, because if I need to make a quick exit, I can't grab my backpack and jump out of the car. That's not going to work. So I really put all my eggs into this basket. Got in the car, we started driving. And he said, when I saw you standing out there, it reminded me of my days traveling around, because I took some time off after college and I traveled around Mexico. And he, this is a Mexican. And I was like, this is my guy. This is great. I picked the person. And then it was even more confirmed that this was my guy, because as we started talking, I had been reading all of Carlos Castaneda's books. Carlos Castaneda being an anthropologist from California who went to Mexico and wanted to do research on peyote and other power plants. And he met Don Juan, who is a Yaqui warrior shaman. And he had all these experiences with Don Juan, and he wrote about them in like 10 books. And They had to do with like lucid dreaming and psychedelic experiences. But Don Juan was always talking about how this is really important. This is serious stuff. And this is like training to become a warrior, to go through life as a warrior does, impeccable is what he always talked about. Lowering self-importance, dropping, like getting rid of self-importance. I don't know how we got onto the conversation, me and this driver, but it turned out that he had read all the books too. He was a big fan of Carlos Castaneda. So we started talking about that. I mean, these are experiences that are sort of beyond your understanding, right? Like, how does this happen? And everyone has these experiences, and we all know when they happen, these moments of synchronicity. I was in a mode of travel in which this was my state of mind all the time. It was like, it just truly felt like a river, like it was just a river flowing.
Hey, Josh here. I love making this podcast, and I'd love to make it my full-time gig. Besides telling the stories, I'm basically a one-man band, and that takes time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the Patreon link in the show notes. And thanks.
So I should back up and explain why I was going to Michoacan. So in Chihuahua, I was walking around the city and I was in one of the town squares, and there were buskers, basically. There were like people playing instruments for money. There were beggars. There were young kids making out. I mean, that's the place, to do everything in the town square, right? And there was this one guy. He was tall, bald, like shaved head, like strapping guy. And he had these poster boards laid out on the ground, and he was taking donation. He was asking for donations. And the material, the pictures, the writings that he had on the sign that he had made was all about the reforestation of Mexico. And I started sort of talking to him, and I could tell he wasn't crazy or anything. I mean, he was a real deep guy, very educated, very invested in this mission of his. So I sort of hung out with him for a few hours, and we got dinner, and he was not threatening at all. He was very friendly. We were talking, and he asked me where I was headed, and I said, I don't know. And he goes, you should go to Michoacan, where I'm from. Of course, this is all in Spanish. And he says, you should go to Michoacan. There's this beautiful, small little town where I live, where I'm from, where my family's from. And it's beautiful. And the women there are beautiful, and it's just incredible. And if you don't have any other place to go, you should go. I got family there. They would put you up. It would be great. And I thought, maybe, I might do that. And so I sort of put it in the back of my head, and he gave me a photograph of himself. And on the back of it, he scribbled out kind of like a letter of introduction to his brother who lived there. And he just wrote this note on the back that essentially, I couldn't totally read it. His handwriting wasn't that great, but I got the gist, what I thought was the gist of it, which is like, this is Jacobo. That's how I was traveling. I was traveling under the name Jacobo, which is my name in Spanish. He's traveling, and please, treat him like family. And so I put that picture in my little Lonely Planet Mexico guidebook, and I kept it there. And he, the name of his town was Tinguindin. And I looked on a map, and I found Tinguindin. It's in Michoacan. It's like in the mountains. So here I am. I'm hitchhiking, and I have a vague idea that I want to head down to Michoacan. And the car that pulled over, this guy, he was going to a town called Uruapan, which is a city in Michoacan, which is close enough to where I wanted to go that I thought, oh, well, that's fine. You throw a dart, anywhere in Mexico, and then you can get any place else by just taking a bus, right? Because buses go everywhere. That's the main, means of travel. So I find a bus, and I didn't think about the timing or how far it was or what time of day I would arrive. And I didn't plan that far in advance. And so I got on the bus and I realized I'm going to get there at night. It's not ideal for a person, to go to a town we're talking a village, right? We're talking a very small village. I knew that much because it was a tiny dot on the map. Obviously things shut down at night and there's not as many people awake. And this was, I think it was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I didn't, I was really going into the void. So the bus pulls up and there's like a little shack there with some, chips and Cokes and drinks. I get off the bus. I'm like, this is it. I'm getting off the bus. I'm committing. Bus drives away. I go up to the little food stand and I talked to the guy and I said, listen, this guy Carlos sent me, this is his picture. Do you know him? And he looked at the picture and he was like, oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I got you. He says, El Diablo. And this kid comes over, right? This like 18-year-old kid whose nickname is El Diablo. I would come to find out that everyone in Mexico has a nickname. He says, El Diablo, come over here. And I'm thinking, shit, the devil is like, the devil's going to take me somewhere. And the guy at the food stand says, take this guy over to, so he starts walking me down sort of into the village, into, down this row of, to call them houses isn't really quite right. It's a different landscape. It wasn't like dirt poor. It was just normal, for a village. And he points to a door. El Diablo points at this door right there. And so I knock on it. And this guy opens up the door. And this is a tall, strapping, good-looking guy with a cowboy hat and a goatee. Looks just like the guy I met in Chihuahua. Like, they look like brothers, and they are. I say, hey, you don't know me, and I'm really sorry to be knocking on your door. I met this guy, and he said, come here, and here I am, and here's his picture. And he takes the picture. He looks very suspicious at me, like, what's this little white dude, a skinny little white dude doing here? And he takes this picture, he reads the back, and then he suddenly changes. He's like, that moment in Romancing the Stone when he says, Joan Wilder? The Joan Wilder? That was the shift in this guy, because he opens the door and he's looking at me. I show him a picture of his brother and he's like, Jacobo, come on in, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, my brother, my silly brother, pinche way. And he's like, I haven't seen that guy in so long. Oh, my God. And he starts speaking English to me. He's saying all this in English. And he takes me and he says, oh, yeah, come in. You'll stay here. He goes, you'll stay in my kid's room. This is my wife over there. Hey, this is Jacobo. He's introducing me to everybody. And I drop my bags off and he says, yeah, let's go upstairs. So we go up to the roof and he's like, this town is great. This town is all about avocados. So he tells me in every direction is avocado fields. And he says, I'll take you to my ranch. We'll go to my ranch tomorrow, but right now you stay here tonight. And I'm like, I literally threw a dart on a map and hit it and then landed into a nice mattress, a really nice place to stay. And that is where I landed. And I ended up staying there for a month. So this guy, he takes me to his dad's ranch house, right? He says, you can stay here as long as you like. And he says, give me that photo, the photo of my brother. He takes the photo and he turns it back and he reads the thing again. And he says, it says here, you're going to teach English. You're going to teach English to the kids in our little village. This is so great. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? This guy I had met in Chihuahua had said, this guy's going to come down and he's going to teach our kids, English. And I had no idea. I think I'm there for 4 weeks and, I do it. I send for textbooks, English textbooks, and I create a sign-up sheet. It does not go well. 100 people show up the first day, 10 people show up the next day. I'm not a born English teacher. I tried to fulfill my destiny. There's something about fully committing yourself to an endeavor. I gave away all my stuff. I bought a one-way ticket. I got on the bus and I went. You're open. It somehow opens you up to things, and you you can read the tea leaves a little bit better. I got the sense as I travel around that sort of a sense of freedom and a sense of like anything is possible. And we would always say, me and whoever I was traveling with, we would say, Todo es posible in Mexico. Todo es posible.
I want to thank Jake for sharing his experience. Make sure to check out his photography Instagram at senior.photo, that's F-O-T-O, and keep an eye out for his forthcoming film, Home Safe. This podcast was created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. If you like the show, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to financially support the show, check out my Patreon page. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next week.